I seem to hate all articles in the mainstream media these days. Okay, so this video is almost entirely a response to an article called Get Real, Terry Pratchett is Not a Literary Genius, written by Jonathan Jones and published in The Guardian. I will quote it extensively throughout, but you might want to have a click through and a quick read first to see what on earth I'm gibbering about. This video is not unlike many that I have made before. It is a continued cry against the ridiculousness of the assurance that there is some literature out there that is just better than others. Let's deconstruct Jones's argument that Pratchett's work is of the ordinary potboiler variety and Jones's life is too short for such trash. It's always a good start when an author proclaims that he's going to decry an author's entire canon of work without having read a single one of them. Yes, this discredits you, no ifs, no buts, literally no legs to stand on. Jones cites that a flick through, though, revealed the prose to be seemingly very ordinary. So let's start with the idea that all good literature is technically very good, measured in complex prose and highfalutin poetics. But wait, I'm sure I can name at least one or two works that even the fustiest of Oxford dons would award canonical status, and yet that are written entirely in slang, in a dialect, or completely ignoring conventional concepts of grammar. But if I throw in enough syllables, plumb the depths of the most antiquarian of dictionaries, then it'll be good writing, right? That must be why every good poet still writes in the exact unadulterated style of Keats. Okay, let's go on to Jones's accusation that a middlebrow cult of the popular is holding literature to ransom. Okay, this I laughed out loud at, because this has definitely never been my experience. This has in fact been the opposite of my experience. My reading life has felt like bashing my head over and over against a brick wall constructed by a cult of the elite. Throughout my studies, I have been looked down upon for going anywhere near the edges of the traditional Western canon. Throughout my reading life, I have had numerous comments made against my intelligence for even the idea that I might read something that isn't capital L literature. And what are these works that are conclusively better than everything else? Why, predominantly white, cisgendered male, heterosexual and Western. Yes, you can definitely name exceptions, but they are exceptions. Jones's definition of genius are books that can change your life, your beliefs and your perceptions, which for him is limited to the likes of Gunter Grass and Garcia Marquez. And that's great for him, I'm glad they work for him. I myself quite like Love in the Time of Cholera. But you know what? Personally, Pratchett has had more of an effect on my life. It's what Jones's article unwittingly highlighted for me. That Pratchett's accessibility has had a huge, far-reaching effect on peoples, plural. And why shouldn't that be considered a type of greatness, a type of genius? You know what? It's in 1984, which a majority have read, rather than Proust, which the ivory towers have locked down, that you can find what has formed a social consciousness. Everyone reads trash sometimes, but why are we now pretending, as a culture, that it is the same thing as literature? Am I wrong in finding literature to be the most snobby of all art forms? Is that just because I spend most of my time in it? I feel like this kind of thing happens less in music. I mean, who these days would proclaim jazz to be a quintessentially lesser genre of music than anything produced by Brahms? Within Terry Pratchett, I found complex considerations of the idea of what is nationality. I found interesting discussions of gender, which looked at the idea that you can only be a strong, worthy female if you adopt male traits. I found postmodern Baudrillardian ideas of story and narrativization actually being what constructs our realities. But Jones accuses it of mental laziness without considering that this might actually be a point of perspective. If you've been raised in a childhood of Crusoe and a discourse of Dickens, there is nothing stretching about continuing on into the names touted by Leavis. But there are many other backgrounds out there for which the language and experiences which are held up to be the best which has been thought and said are actually irrelevant and inaccessible. I am fed up with seeing the writing that resonates with me called trash, called fluff, called unworthy. I paid my dues, like many gender and class and racial minorities before me. I went and studied my fancy degree at my lauded university, and I read these names so people would deign to consider me literate. And I'm glad I have. But mostly because it gives me some experience to stand upon when shouting from the rooftops, or in my case the bedroom floors of East London, that this literature is not the greatest thing in the world to me. And not because I myself am lesser, which is definitely how articles like this intend to make people feel when literature doesn't resonate with them, but because my experience is different and my priorities lie elsewhere. Yeah, I love some classic literature, but I have learnt that it doesn't make me ignorant to love some things that aren't studied in red brick buildings. To go on and challenge why they aren't studied in red brick buildings. Weirdly enough, there's a reason there isn't a definitive list of what is good literature. Let's go back to Virginia Woolf asking which Shakespeare play is better. Good literature is entirely a matter of perspective, and often that is socially and historically constructed. If a book affects you, that is all that matters. What is one person's good literature won't necessarily be yours, and a book doesn't have to be technically good, well written, or even conform to conventional grammar to be the most life-changing thing you have ever read. Weirdly enough, our author finishes his article by referencing Mansfield Park. Now, I'm a huge Austen fan. I have sought out every little half-written thing she's wrote, to the extent where I think I've now read everything we still have from her. And, like Jones, I loved Mansfield Park. But I honestly think I read it in the way the author decries reading. It was completely unlife-altering for me. It was a fun little story with some pretty turns of phrase. But that's honestly all I came away from Fanny Price with. Ultimately, we are all different people, and books cannot be objectively categorised as good or bad by any one person, because as they sit there as words on a page, books are half-formed things. It is in reading a book that we create a book. And all being different people will all read the same book slightly differently. One person's prose will be lazy, another overworked, a third will find that particular style the perfect representation of the drudgery of their everyday existence. We need to stop demonising mass market literature and respect the fact that there is something special in a work that can appeal to a huge number of people, for whatever reason that might be. Accessibility does not necessarily equal trash. That is literally the definition of snobbery that Jones was trying to get away from. Finally, it is not okay to keep holding these opinions and publishing these articles about restrictive literary greatness. Because the myth that there is this objectively better literature which is horribly exclusive means loads of people think that literature is not for them. In doing this, we are depriving would-be readers of their solace and of complex considerations of the world. We're depriving the world of many writers who don't choose to study literature at school and don't read in their spare time, because these stories they're told they should read don't work for them. Of course, love your own personal reads, but consider that that love is probably the product of your own personal self. Don't raise up what you like to read and in turn put down everyone who disagrees with what is entirely your own literary tastes. Jones, I will finish by reworking your incredibly clickbaity turn of phrase and telling you to get real. It is time we stopped this pretense that elitism is equal to genius. Really, now. Hope you are in the mood for a rant today, guys. Do leave me any comments or thoughts you have in the comments section down below. I will see you there. Bye, guys. Discworld on the back of 4 elephants on the back of a giant world turtle flying through space. Tourist with strange botanical name and boisterous luggage meets cowardly wizard Rincewind. Evil magic book needs defeating, as do creatures from